All right, what's going on, Facebook family? This is AJ. I'm getting ready to go live to discuss CCSD, an examination of classism, tokenism, and racism within the district. I'm going to wait and see um, how many people come on. What's going on, Big E? Appreciate that. Appreciate you being in. What's up, Rashawn? Um, Glad you guys were able to tune in. Appreciate that. Hey, how's it going, Ann? How's it going, Mike? Um, for everybody that's tuning in, I just want you to know I really appreciate the fact that you guys are taking the time out to follow me, to listen to what it is that I have to say. Those of you who know me off of the book know that education is something that I'm extremely passionate about. It's something that I make a part of my life every day, all day. Um, Also, just know that I'm also a passionate advocate for education, especially within the Black community. And I think it needs to be said that in me saying that, it's not that I am against education for anybody else. It's just the mere fact that all too often in every category of educational statistics, you see African American students and families at the very bottom. And sitting as an employee of Charleston County School District, and as someone that's very active and engaged in the community, along with people such as Eric Jackson and many of the same folks that are tuning into this Facebook Live broadcast. Um, what's up, Queen? How you doing? Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate that. Um, I wanted to put some information out there and just have a discussion before the November 6th election. And I may be wrong on the exact date, but um, one of the things that I want folks to understand is that this election that is coming up is probably going to be one of the most important local elections in recent memory. I think by now we've all seen what has happened in our country with the presidential election of 2016. We've seen the environment that has permeated pretty much everything from a political standpoint. And so, right here in Charleston County School District, which is the second largest school district in the state of South Carolina, by the way, for those who don't know, we've seen a tremendous amount of turmoil. We've seen a tremendous amount of discord. We've seen a lot of miscommunication, lack of communication. We've seen a lot of things that mirror exactly what is wrong in our country. And I think it's important for me to start speaking out regarding education. What's up, Tanang? Love you, sweetie. Um, I think I need to start out with the fact that Charleston County School District, being the second largest school district in the state of South Carolina, has had a long, storied history of not doing right by African American children. This is not a mystery. This is not something that is debatable. It is fact. It is proven to be fact by the fact that Charleston County School District recently hired Clemson University to do a study on issues with race and diversity within the district. For them to take that step is, in fact, an acknowledgement that there are problems. But I think we have to acknowledge where those problems come from, where they stem from. And so I titled this broadcast Classism, Tokenism, and Racism within CCSD because I feel like those three things build up to what we see in the district. First and foremost, Charleston County, as a county in the state of South Carolina, is one of the wealthiest counties. This is a fact. And why that is important is because a county's wealth determines the level of funding that it can provide for its educational system. Currently, the way our schools are funded, the system and the formulas that are used, which I'm not going to go into because they can become very convoluted, tends to be very problematic. But here in Charleston County, we are fortunate enough to have enough wealth within homes, within taxes, the taxes that we contribute, sales taxes, things of that nature, to be able to provide a robust, large budget for our schools. But in that, we also live in an environment where those who um, oftentimes sit in decision making positions do not feel as though that wealth and the expenditures regarding education need to be placed in certain environments. Most notably, you will oftentimes hear, as it relates to education, a reference to per pupil expenditures. And basically, that term refers to how much money out of the particular school district's budget goes to students in a school. And it sounds large when you hear it, when you hear someone say, oh, well, they're spending $15,000 per student at Burke. Well, here's where the classism comes in. You have to understand how that number is arrived at, or how do you arrive at that number. And basically, your per pupil expenditure comes from taking the total budget for a school, dividing that number by the total number of students in attendance at that school. And from there, you arrive at how much money you are expending per pupil. That's it. That doesn't attest to the quality of education that that student is getting. That doesn't attest to whether or not that student's academic and social needs are being met. That is just a mathematical equation that oftentimes has little to do with the teachers or staff in that school, but rather just how the financial aspects of that school and the district work or interplay. Why is that important, and how does that relate to everything that I'm saying? So I work at Burke High School. And Burke High School, for those who don't know, is a historic and storied institution, one that is near and dear to my heart. Working there for almost 10 years, being involved on that campus, seeing parents, community members, just the whole community of Burke High School, which has embraced me, helped me see things that I may not have seen before, is really put me in a position of being passionate about education overall. But Burke High School is also a very much maligned school. It is a victim of classism. It is a victim of tokenism. It is a victim of racism. Much like all the other majority black schools, whether it's a elementary school, a middle school, or a high school in Charleston County. But I'll use Burke for the purpose of this live. Burke High School is over a century old. It is over a century old. It sits basically smack dab in the middle of downtown Charleston. It has produced some of the greatest minds in America, not just Charleston or South Carolina, but in America. It has rich and storied traditions. It has a alumni network that is out of this world. But it is also one of the most ignored, one of the most maltreated schools in Charleston County School District's portfolio. Why do I say that? Well, because for years, Burke has suffered from under-enrollment or low enrollment. And that problem stems from one simple fact: classism mixed with racism. What do I mean when I say that? If you look at the community that sits around Burke High School, it is by and largely Caucasian, often with middle to upper middle class income families who live directly around the school. All right. Peninsula Charleston, downtown Charleston, which is the area that should technically feed into Burke High School, has approximately 5 elementary schools. Yet for the last 10 years, if not longer, Burke has suffered from low enrollment, and everyone tries to deny the fact of why that is. all you need to determine why Burke does not have the number of students that it needs or that some feel that it should have is to look at the environment directly around Burke. The vast majority of the students in Burke, with the exception of maybe one or two, are African American. Now, by last numbers, and these are approximate, not definite, the total population of downtown Charleston was about 70-30 white to black. So, with the only high school that sits on the peninsula being largely African American, I would say 97-98% African American, yet the vast majority of the people, according to census data, not being black, where's the disconnect? Where's the problem? Also, let's take an exercise in understanding schools and school feeder patterns. Downtown Charleston has approximately 5 elementary schools, right? Okay, so out of that 5 elementary schools, let's say each year they feed into the standalone middle school on the peninsula. Public, you're right, Eric, public high school. Burke High School is the only public high school on the peninsula, all right? Severely under-enrolled. All right, now I'll come back to that. With that being said, if you have 5 elementary schools on the peninsula, and each year those 5 elementary schools give up 100 students who matriculate from 5th grade to 6th grade, which is when you start the middle school process, that's 500 students that should be coming to the middle school, right? Give or take, and conservative estimates. That 500 then matriculate through the middle school. So each year, the middle school should be giving Burke approximately 150 to 200 students coming through the door. That's just a conservative estimate. Last couple of years, Burke has struggled to make an enrollment of about 400, tops 420. Yet, the school gets criticized by many in the community and some in the district because of its poor enrollment numbers. But my question is this, and it's a very simple one. If schools, public schools, are following what's called the feeder patterns, which means your child goes from elementary school to a designated middle school to a designated high school, where are students dropping off from? So if your child is a student in Sanders Clyde, CPA, Mitchell, James Simmons, Meminger, then at some point they're supposed to wind up in Burke. Yet, if I were to go through the rosters of students at Burke right now, I guarantee you I would not see students coming from those schools. And herein lies the problem when we start talking about classism. I was a member of a former Facebook group called D20 Parents, and myself, along with several others, engaged in dialogue in this group, which was a mixture of black, white parents of students on the peninsula. There was also those of us who worked at the high school and other schools who engaged. That group demonstrated a classic level of classism because many of the parents, most of whom were not black, believed that Burke was not good enough for their students. In fact, I would say this: if you go throughout Charleston County and you look at the vast majority of what is often termed failing schools or troubled schools, the vast majority of them are largely African American. And the thing that you will often hear most parents say, I want my child to go to a good school. On the surface, I don't have a problem with that statement. I really don't. But I challenge folks to acknowledge what that statement says. And simply put, black schools are not good schools. Majority black schools are not good schools. Now, I'm not going to say that we should force parents to put their children in academic environments where they don't feel as though they will get what they need. because that's a fruitless argument. What I am going to say is, as a voting public, as parents, as guardians, the bigger issue is, why aren't we willing to make all schools good schools? You don't want to send your kid to Burke. Okay, fine. Fine. Then what are we doing? What is the district doing to make Burke a good school for the students and parents who send their children there day in and day out with the expectation, with the hope of them getting a quality education to be successful individuals out in the real world? Here's something else I want to point out when we start talking about classism. There's a document. If you get a chance, go online. It's called the Schott Report. SCHOTT. It's from the Schott Foundation. Okay. I learned about this document probably about 10 years ago. And it was when I was doing some research on educational outcomes. But basically, this document studies school districts with African American male student populations of at least 10,000 students, right? So they study the largest school districts that have the largest black male populations. So when I first learned about this document, like I said, about 10 years ago, it was chronicling the graduation rates using 2007, 2008 data. And at that point, Charleston County was featured. This document made the news and everything, but very few people seem to have heard of it. But I'm bringing it up to show something that's significant, and that's a pattern. Charleston County, again, second largest school district in the state of South Carolina. At that time, 2007, 2008, graduation rate for black males, I think that year Charleston County had about 10,031 black males within it. 24% of the black males that year graduated. 24%. Fast forward to the next cohort, next cycle, next year that this report was done, 2015. Let me pull it up to make sure I've got the right data. All right, so this is the next one. Again, Charleston County, this is 2015. This covers the 2011-2012 school year, right? So in 2011, 2012, so that's about 6 years ago, right? Charleston County, 9,947 black males enrolled, okay? Hey, Brent. Out of that 9,000, the graduation rate for Charleston County was 30%. So from 2007, 2008 to 2011, we rose, give or take, 6 percentage points. 6. In a district that is the second largest in the state and arguably one of the wealthiest, right? Charleston, as a city, as an area, as a region, has been winning accolades as a top tourist destination. It is the place to be. Charleston County School District boasts one of the top high schools, not in South Carolina, but in the nation, an academic magnet. Which brings me to another point. Classism and racism again. For the accolades that Charleston County School District gives to Academic Magnet and other people in the community by large, what's really never spoken of are the origins of Academic Magnet. And for many people who have been paying attention and who know about what's going on, Academic Magnet started on Burke High School's campus. Academic Magnet, the school, broke away from Burke High School once it was determined that those parents of those students at Academic Magnet, which was basically a school within a school, it was an exercise in trying to increase the enrollment of Burke High School back then. Back then, there are people on this post who remember that, who were here. I wasn't, but I know the story from those people who were there. But one of those experiments that Charleston County did to try to increase enrollment, and you've got examples of this all throughout, how there was an attorney, Larry Kabrowski, who sued against Buist Academy's racial quota. Okay? And there are people who will never acknowledge these two things, amongst others. But those two things show some of the classism. And if you don't want to call it racism, you definitely have to call it classism, where you have parents who don't feel as though commingling with black students is good enough for their students. It wasn't about the quality of education, truly. Because if you could get a quality of education on the campus of Burke High School, and you share basically the same facilities, then what's the problem? The fact that you're walking around a campus that has a significant percentage of students who don't look like yours? You're right, Jermaine. Buist used to be black too. But to let people talk about it, Buist is and has always been the way that it is. And these are the things that if we're going to really be serious about improving education, if we're going to really be serious about changing things for the better for all of our students, we have to talk about the way that we treat black students, black parents, and the black community as it relates to Charleston County School District. One of the things that I want to bring up is that in November, there are 4 seats coming up. And for those of you who don't know or who may not understand how our board works, basically, you're right, Amanda, I got you. Basically, we have 4 seats. Charleston County School District does something that I think is very important. They stagger board elections, so you don't have a completely new board every 4 years. And that's very important, okay? We need to have experienced people on the board to make sure that the new people who may come on understand how things work. So here's something that we need to understand about why November is so important. 4 years ago, we elected 3 new board members, and we re-elected 1. We re-elected Cindy Broncoats, who was board chairperson. She was for North Charleston. We elected Eric Mack, Kate Darby, Chris Stobbs, and oh yeah, those are the 4. I'm sorry, my count was off. And I think that those people got elected because back during that time, we were also caught up with something else. We were dealing with a situation, again, with Academic Magnet, as well as tragedies with Walter Scott, Mother Emanuel, things like that. But with the board election, I must say this. One of the things that we had during that time was a lot of confusion being brought up regarding a situation at Academic Magnet called Watermelon Gate. For those of you who don't remember that, you're right, Jesse, 2014. For those of you who don't remember that, Watermelon Gate was a situation where the then winning football team for Academic High School was called out for a very dubious ceremony in which every time they won a game, they celebrated by beating or smashing a watermelon that had a face drawn on it and making what was termed monkey sounds. For those of you who were here in the district at that time, which I was working in the district, I knew about this firsthand. This incident was brought to the attention of then Superintendent Dr. Nancy McGinley by then board member Michael Miller, who had it brought to his attention by a black parent who saw it. But that incident, for those of us who remember, really cemented how deep the classism mixed with racism not was, is in Charleston County. Because then Superintendent McGinley took the steps to address it to the best of her ability. And I got to say this, whether you liked her for everything she did or not, I can appreciate the forwardness of Dr. McGinley at that point, trying to address this situation, recognizing what it meant to the black community. She took the steps by then removing the head coach from the position of coach, not his position as an employee of the district, but his position as coach, pending, the investigation and whatnot. Now, of course, during this time, there were a whole bunch of people who felt a certain kind of way, especially those from the academic magnet community, because there were those people who then said they could not understand what the outrage was, that it wasn't kids being racist. And you know what? I'll agree. It probably wasn't kids being racist, but the coach and those associated, those adults knew. And if they didn't know, then the problem is they needed sensitivity training. But I digress. The superintendent, McGinley, removed Coach Walpole. I remember that it was less than 24 hours, 24 whole hours. 3,000 plus signatures were compiled and raised to reinstate this coach. This story made national news. It hit all the local media. Okay? All of a sudden, there was this robust discussion of what does it mean? It's just a watermelon. All of these things got brought up as if to dismiss the outrage of the black community. Never mind the fact that Academic Magnet once again sits on a campus that once housed another predominantly black high school in Barnes-Wilson. But once again, during that time, CCSD's classism and its racism raised its ugly head. Because of Dr. McGinley's actions, because of her actions, and the malice that certain people within the community and those on the board held for her, she was forced out. I'm going to say it again. She was forced out. The coach who coached the team, who had a dubious winning ceremony, winning ritual, he got reinstated. I don't even think his paperwork made it to HR within 24 hours. I think it should also be noted that during that time, there was maybe one African-American player on the team, and they were, from my understanding, the ones that started the petition, which floors me. And it's not as though Academic Magnet has not had its share of issues. And I'm not saying that just to pick on Academic Magnet, but I use it as the justification of why I say what I say when I term this classism. Because the vast majority, if you go look at Academic Magnet's numbers, you will see that it is in fact a bastion of classism masquerading as academic excellence in Charleston County School District. Because if the same level of support and influence, if the same level of emphasis on parental engagement and involvement that existed at Academic Magnet and on that campus was allowed to be at every campus in Charleston County School District, all students would rise. But as long as we believe that we must have elite institutions that supposedly represent the best and brightest, then we will continue to fail in education. That incident that happened on Academic Magnet's campus which led to the ouster of the previous superintendent, began a snowball, which brings us to where we are now in CCSD. Because after that, we went through this turmoil of having to have co-superintendents, which was mind-boggling. Because in the organizational hierarchy, we had a chief academic officer by the name of Dr. Lisa Herring. Dr. Lisa Herring was more than qualified to take the helm of CCSD, even if it was on an interim basis. But somehow or another, the board at that time decided that it was best to have co-superintendents. Previous Chief Financial Officer Michael Bobby and Dr. Lisa Herring. It should be noted that the previous superintendent, Dr. McGinley, was also a chief academic officer who was allowed to apply for the job when her predecessor, Dr. Goodlow Johnson, left the district. So it was interesting to me to see how the dynamic shifted. It could be, and this is just purely my theory, so please don't take it as me saying it was fact, but I find that it tends to have at least some merit to think about. But it was interesting that Dr. Herring was made to be a co-superintendent, given the fact that she herself had endured some issues at Academic Magnet regarding her own daughter. And if many of you don't know what I'm talking about, remember the incident with the young lady in the class where she made the tweet about she wished Nick would. The other individual involved in that incident was the daughter of then Chief Academic Officer Dr. Herring. So I found it interesting that when it came time to fill in the slot vacated by previous Superintendent McGinley, that suddenly there was a robust discussion of, well, now we need to have co-superintendents. Again, that's my opinion. That's my personal view. I can't prove it one way or another, but I just found it to be truly interesting that the school that is held up as the crown jewel of Charleston County led to the ouster of then Superintendent McGinley, which, by the way, and I don't know if many people realize this, that same year or either the direct year after that, Charleston County got its first ever excellent rating. That excellent rating came because of Dr. Nancy McGinley. Dr. Nancy McGinley helped Charleston County get an excellent rating. Now, I gotta say this. Black students were still having issues, but let's look at context. Your superintendent gave your entire district an excellent rating, and you gave her the boot. Interesting. So now, let's talk about racism. After Dr. McGinley's exit, Charleston County suffered tragedy in the form of the Walter Scott killing and then the massacre at Mother Emanuel. Walter Scott was killed April. Mother Emanuel happened June. During that time, as Charleston, and especially Black Charleston, is grieving, the activist community is attempting to try to piece together, what's happening, how we can, figure out what's going on. Charleston County School District, in particular, the board, decided that they were going to press ahead with the search and the hiring of a superintendent. I remember this because I remember representatives of the Black community saying, hold on, wait a minute. We're still reeling from a death, a tragedy by which that took members of the Charleston County School District community. The Payne doctor was a member of Charleston County School District's community. The tragedy happened less than 100 yards away from the district office. Yet, the then board, 2015, the then board decided, no, we got to go ahead And we got to get this new person in. Enter Dr. Jarita Postlewaite. And probably what could be considered the biggest FU to the black community, that then board, which was problematic in itself. And I should note that the 4 people who are up for election were not a part of that committee. I need to say that. The 4 people who were up for election this year, with the exception being Cindy Coates, she was there. She was there. But Kate Darby, Chris Dobbs, and Eric Mack had not been elected yet. They would not be elected until November. So they technically did not have anything to do with bringing in Dr. Jarita Postlewaite. Mismanagement of school district dollars also happened during that time too, right? You are right. But it had not come out yet, Jermaine. It had not. You're right, Jesse. She was board chair at that time. Now, this brings me to the current issue that I see many people having with Charleston County. There are a lot of people who criticize Charleston County's management of its resources. As well you should. One of the biggest issues that I think exists now and has technically always existed within Charleston County is its communication between its office staff and the community at large. There are several people who are no longer in the district. There are departments that have been dismantled, renamed. There's a lot of ambiguity as to what is what within the district. Okay? One of the problems that I have right now is that the district is very, very clumsy at acknowledging when it is wrong and when it has to actually address the public's concerns. I think one of the biggest issues as well is the fact that the district oftentimes chooses which public and which concerns they want to address. Enter the race matter. Again, going back to the issue of Charleston County and how it chooses to address things in the community. I may not agree with everything that Dr. Postlewaite has done since she's been in office. But this is one thing I will say in fairness to her. There's a lot of things that were in place before she got here. There was an attitude of condescension as it related to the district and how it addressed concerns in the black community. Okay, this is not anything that's new. One of the things that I want people to understand is that since Dr. Postlewaite has been superintendent, the issues in the district have not multiplied. Just like we cannot blame Donald Trump for the issues multiplying. It's now that more people are paying attention to those issues, because those issues are now affecting people that they didn't once affect. I remember sitting about a year ago down at 75 Calhoun. I remember it like it was yesterday when the incident regarding teacher evaluations took place and folks were upset. Okay? Folks were upset. Folks in Mount Pleasant were upset. Folks in West Ashley were upset. There was a lot of people upset because they felt as though they were being unfairly targeted, that their jobs were in jeopardy, their jobs were being based on an evaluation, which was not a true interpretation of their ability and what they were doing in the classrooms. When I went to the rally, I saw a lot of people, mostly white. And here's what I have to say to that. It was interesting because what they were saying I was very familiar with, but I wasn't familiar with it for them. I was familiar with it for all the teachers that taught in the primarily black Title I schools who had been raked over the coals for years. Teachers who had been ignored because they weren't in the school of choice. They weren't in, the school that certain people want to send their kids to. So in 2016, we saw the amassing of the West Ashley and Mount Pleasant parents and teachers. Like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I remember standing outside watching all these white teachers, with the exception of maybe one or two black faces in this entire crowd, saying, where was this outrage when it was Sanders Clyde? Where was this outrage when it was Burke? Where was this outrage when it was Morningside? Where was this outrage when it was Lincoln? Which, by the way, I got to say this before I forget. Oh, Lincoln. That poor school out there in the country. That poor school that got unceremoniously closed after having to endure years of mistreatment at the hands of the district. Okay? That school that had mold in it because it would flood and it wasn't properly remediated. That school that had its alumni going back to the 1950s, come down to 75, many of them older black people, basically begging the district to leave their one school open. Their one school open. You're right, Sadi, North Charleston. I can't even name all the schools that was mistreated, but let me just say all the black schools, okay? But Lincoln, I remember standing in that boardroom watching these black people who were doing their best to fight for that school. And I remember the level of condescension that Chris Dobbs had when he told the crowd, oh, this is a good thing to take these students from their school and bust them into Wando. I remember that. I remember how basically this board member, this representative, was telling black people, oh no, you don't know what's good for you. Here, we're going to send your kids here. We're going to have them on a bus. Oh, and we're going to put Wi-Fi on it. We're going to have a teacher's assistant because of the length of time these kids would have to be on a bus to get to Wando. And I remember Michael Miller saying to him, so how do we know that them going to Wando is going to make any better academic outcomes for them than where they are now? And that's the question that never gets answered. Because Chris Dobbs or nobody else sitting on that board could answer it appropriately. The question I have now is, who's tracking the data of the students that have been pushed into Wando? You know what? Let me ask this question. How many people remember Fraser downtown? And when Fraser closed, where are the Fraser kids and how are they doing? And the issue that we also have to acknowledge that Charleston County has a problem with is associating a white school with a good school. Very few people have the courage to say that because, again, so many folks are oftentimes fearful of retribution. But if we're going to say that we in the 21st century are going to move forward as a community, we're going to have all these conversations and discussions on race, then we have to speak it when it is. This part, this is the thing that I have to say. Okay? This is the thing that I have to say. Oh, somebody just corrected me. The 4 that are up for re-election were, in fact, part of the hiring team for Postal Wait. I stand corrected. Okay? I apologize. One of the things that I always try to do is make sure I give out accurate information. Thank y'all for staying up on that. So then that brings in another valid point. Basically, the existing board members who are now up for re-election gave us Dr. Postlewaite. They basically thumbed their noses at the grief and pain of the black community who was dealing with Walter Scott and Mother Emanuel, along with never having gotten over the issues with Watermelon Gate, never having effectively addressed that issue. Thank y'all for keeping me straight. You're right, Courtney. CCSD promised to look after the Frazier kids, and I guess they looked after them. Now, brings me to another point. There's countless issues that I could keep going in to, but I have to say this. What is it that we can do? The election in November is one step. It's an important one, but it's not the only one that we as community members need to take. There are several people who are out here on the front lines fighting daily to address needs in education. Eric Jackson, Christine Washington, Kwanzaa Washington, folks who are on this thread, Rajan, Samuel, Jesse, pretty much the vast majority of the people who are on this thread. And I'm bringing this up because I don't want people to think that this is just me talking. These conversations have been happening for years, okay? And these conversations have been happening by people who are affected. What needs to happen to change this, okay? We need to make CCSD understand what we will accept. The problem has been that for far too long, board members get elected. What's up, Carlos? Board members get elected and they sit in a position and they don't answer to anyone. I remember how the new board that got elected basically refused to really meet with the black community. Why was that interesting? Because fast forward to when the Mount Pleasant and West Ashley folks got upset, okay, and protested down at 75, I distinctly remember that either if it wasn't the exact next board meeting, it was one after that where I went to and I see the board basically apologizing to all these parents, many of whom were white. And I'm sitting there like, so wait, you're apologizing to a group of people. Now, granted, the folks in Mount Pleasant and West Ashley have their grievances. I get it. But so did the people in downtown Charleston. So did the people out in McClellanville. So did the people out there on the islands. So did the people in North Charleston. But one of the biggest problems we have in CCSD is not divide and conquer. It's divide and stay away. Because most of the time, folks don't get involved till it's on their front doorstep. I know people who have been fighting for kids in CCSD and they haven't had a kid in CCSD in years. Unfortunately, and I just have to go ahead and say this, to re-elect the 4 board members that we have, Chris Dobbs is not going to run again, so that's first and foremost. But to re-elect the 4 board members that we have would be more of the same. Period. Because those people make decisions on our children. There's an incident that was brought to the attention of the public by my brother Shakim, talking about an incident that happened with child molestation. Okay? And he brought it up. Him and Elvin Spites both brought it up, started championing it along with Lewis Smith. Even though the incident happened in 2014, the way it was handled and the way it wasn't given proper attention to reassure the community, specifically the black community, that it wouldn't happen again, they championed that. Now, one of the things that I will continue to say, and if you follow me on Facebook, you know I'm always trying to engage the community about education. Please, 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 please get involved with your schools. Here's why. Charleston County has become a haven for individuals that are a part of what's called the education reform movement. These are people who are coming in trying to sell the idea that public schools don't work, that the only way to give quality education is to make every school a charter school or to change it into a public-private partnership. We have some of those in Charleston County right now. Let me say this. I'm not against charter schools, okay? First and foremost. I'd be a hypocrite because I helped co-write an application for a charter school, and I worked in one. When properly applied, charter schools can work. Here's what I tell people, though. When the same emphasis that is given to charter schools or public-private partnerships is given to public schools, they can thrive. People get excited by what they see at a charter school or a public-private partnership because they think that that's phenomenal. No, that is what could happen if public schools got the same level of support. Okay? But unfortunately, there are those in power, those in decision-making positions that are playing on the intelligence of the voting public. You will hear me say this over and over and over again. We have more power than we could possibly know as parents and as a voting public. Our children, whether they are in elementary school, middle school, or high school, have a great and tremendous opportunity for education as long as we hold those who are making decisions accountable. We cannot have dismissive or absent board members. If I were to take a poll right now, how many people can say that their representative board member has done anything to convey information to them about what's happening in the school? I got to say this. You know what really gets under my skin is when I read op-eds from board members who I never see in any school except for a special meeting about why our schools aren't working. For those who know me know I work hard. I'm oftentimes one of the first people at the school, one of the last people to leave. I'm there on weekends because of my position. I love my school, but I love public education. Okay? One of the things that I have an issue with is when those who make decisions about our children don't have any connection with our children or with us. Even if we flip the board, one of the things that I need people to understand, and I need y'all to understand this truly right now, we have to make sure that those people who are going to sit and make decisions about the money that's spent, discipline policies, bond referendums, all of that. We have to make sure that those people hear from and see us. And it can't just be one or two people. It can't just be one mouth. We celebrate the people that go down and protest at 75. No. You know what I saw during the whole upheaval about the $18 million shortfall? I saw a bunch of white folks down there. Bunch. There were some black people there too, but I saw a bunch of white folks. I saw a bunch of people who were concerned about their jobs, rightfully so. My position, quote unquote, was one of those positions that got cut during that time. I was a parent advocate. I remember standing before the board, imploring them, hey, y'all need to keep this position because parent advocates are a vital part of the educational process. They are. But that board didn't want or didn't understand parental involvement. Okay? Here's why I was so passionate and still am. I know parents who get up at the crack of dawn, who are oftentimes dog tired, who still do their damnedest to make sure their kids get to school and pay attention. I know parents who are there in their work uniforms at various meetings for their kids. Okay? I know parents who walk through that building at Burke and other schools only hoping that their children can get the best education afforded to them. And it hurts me to know that in many of our schools, you have people who just don't care about those people, especially people of color. It bothers me. One of the things that I need from those of you who are watching this video, take this conversation into your social groups. Okay? This is my first Facebook Live like this. Take this conversation into your social groups. Take this conversation into your family discussions. Take this conversation into any place with anybody with children. When I tell y'all I'm a parent advocate because my mom and dad cared about me. But I also saw other parents who did the same. Our district, CCSD, has shown itself repeatedly that it truly doesn't care about parents, but especially black parents. It cares about those parents that it feels as though will support its initiatives. This is the thing that I need people to understand. Charleston County School District is beholden to us. They are beholden to the people. All the sensational stories that you may hear in the Post and Courier or on Facebook oftentimes happen because Charleston County School District and the board don't feel as though there's anything that will happen to them. I have had the opportunity to speak to board members, and I oftentimes get the same thing. Here's what I think you should look for as a voting member of the public from anybody that's coming to you to get your vote. That person needs to, one, be able to understand who you are, where you live, what it is that affects your life as it relates to education. They need to understand the community in which you come from. Okay? They need to be able to understand your wants and needs for your child or children. They need to be available and approachable to you. Your board representative doesn't need to tell you what to do regarding your children. They need to listen to your concerns and then advise you on ways that you can address those concerns and how they will help you in doing that. Your board members need to be providing you with information. How many people out here know that South Carolina as a state requires something called an SIC to be in every school? The body that's responsible for ensuring that those are in every school is your local school board. How many people have seen your local school board members telling schools, telling the voting public, hey, how many SICs do we have? When I hear parents and community members complain and talk about we don't have what we need to have as it relates to our school, I'm oftentimes wondering, well, how many of you know if we have SICs that are active and engaged, we could have that? That's one actual tool that we can use. And guess what? There are people who know they exist out there. But you know where you have them the weakest? In black schools. Now I can say Burke High School with Eric Jackson and others has worked hard to maintain a relationship as it relates to the SIC. That's one thing. Another thing is making sure that we as parents and guardians support each other. Let me say this. I am willing to support any parent that has a question or concern about issues in Charleston County School District. Through my Facebook page and I have given out my number to individuals, who may have questions or concerns about what's going on. There's a lot of information. I can't give it all to you in a live video, but what I'm trying to do is to get people to understand the context of what's going on. And I would be irresponsible if I didn't say this. Why am I doing this video? Right now in Charleston County, there's also a lot of shadow money being put into this election. There are groups and organizations that have benefited from things being the way they are. Okay? There are groups who benefit from the fact that there are good schools and there are bad schools. Those groups want to maintain the status quo. Those groups are going to put money behind certain candidates. Those groups are going to push certain candidates out there so that it confuses voters. I don't know if any of the prospective candidates are watching this live, but I hope you understand that there are people who are watching you and who are watching your moves as well. And if any of you decide to take the same path as the previous four who are now up for re-election, then the same thing applies to you. You have to go. I see you guys sharing about being on the SIC. Moving forward, there's a forum for those interested. I believe it's on the 2nd, Quality Education Project. I think they're doing a forum for candidates at the Longshoreman Hall downtown. I just saw somebody say that the League of Women Voters is doing a forum after the 2nd. I hope that those people who are sharing that information can let me know, when that happens, so I can push it out on my page. For those of you who are still interested and trying to keep up with what's going on in education in Charleston County, please follow me on Facebook. I will push information out there that I can make sure people get. QEP is the ILA Forum, October 2nd. Here's what I want to close with, guys, because I know I've been on here for a minute and I know y'all got stuff to do. I don't have all the answers. I really don't. I'm passionate. I'm concerned. But the biggest thing I want to do is make sure that people like you guys and others know and understand their rights and responsibilities as it relates to education. I want you guys to feel empowered. I want you to feel as though you can help your kids. I think the greatest injustice that Charleston County School District has done, especially as it relates to Black families, is to make us feel as though we are not worthy. And the other injustice it has done is to make many of the teachers and the staff members in the district feel unappreciated for the effort that they put forward every day. Let me explain to my parents and guardians out there. The greatest tool, the greatest weapon in the fight against ignorance and in building education to where it should be is the combination of committed parents and supported teachers. When you do that, you will change education. Because when teachers feel supported, when teachers know that they're not going to be attacked for things that are not their fault. You're right. Principals too, Jermaine. When teachers, staff, and principals all understand that the community of parents and guardians support them, there is nothing that will stop them from fighting for our children. But the first step that we must take as a voting public is to get the right people sitting in the seats that will make decisions over policy that will govern our schools, govern discipline, and things like that. That starts this November 6th. Hopefully, This won't be the last Facebook video that I make, but I hope that those of you who watched got something from it. I love y'all, and until next time, peace.